Już za chwilkę zaczynamy. Wspaniale. Bardzo miło mi rozpocząć część po angielsku. Ja nazywam się Katarzyna Żółtak, jestem psycholożką, seksuolożką, certyfikowaną sex coach także. Chciałam powiedzieć as well, bo przełączam się już na angielski. Mieszkam aktualnie w Wielkiej Brytanii i oferuję spotkania, wsparcie dla osób indywidualnych, par relacji online. Specjalizuję się zwłaszcza w pracy z kobietami i z osobami ze społeczności LGBTQ+. I jest mi bardzo miło powitać naszą kolejną prelegentkę i też prywatnie moją seks-coachingową mentorkę dr Celinę Criss. Dr Celina Criss jest certyfikowaną coachką seksualności i ma także doktorat z dziedziny seksuologii. I właśnie będzie Celina nam mówić o kinku i o rodzicielstwie. I mam wrażenie, że wykład Agaty, którego też przed chwilą słuchaliśmy, jest troszkę też zahaczył o te tematy, więc jest to idealny czas, żeby się w to zagłębić. I jeszcze chciałam właśnie przy okazji kinku podziękować jeszcze raz Kinky Winky, który jest jednym z naszych sponsorów dzisiaj, czyli queerowemu i bardzo kinkowemu sex shopowi, który też również bardzo polecamy. I Celina, oddaję Ci głos. Bardzo mnie ciekawi, czym się dzisiaj chcesz z nami podzielić, jeśli chodzi o temat kinki rodzicielstwa i bycia kinky rodzicem.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I'm sorry, I tried hitting the unmute and it just didn't do it. First, thank you so much to Kasha and this whole group for inviting me to be with you today. I am really excited to talk to you about one of my favorite topics, two of my favorite topics actually, kink and parenthood, because I do both. And so many times we feel like we have to split ourselves into this dual personality, like they don't jive together. But today I would like to talk to you about how we can weave ourselves back together and have it all. So first, as in way of introduction, my name is Dr. Celina Criss. I would love questions in the chat. I'm sure someone can translate them if needed. And feel free to interrupt if you want more detail on a particular thing. I work as a sex coach, as a sex educator. I'm currently teaching secondary school, so I am very accustomed to frequent interruptions, and it's completely okay with me. And I really do want to tailor this to the needs of the group in here. So if there's something you want to hear more about, please don't be shy. Just pop it in the chat. So with all of that, let's go ahead and begin. These, like I said, these are two topics that I talk about frequently, often separately. But one of the things I have noticed is I get very similar questions on both sides. The number one, of course, is, am I normal? And the answer to that is typically yeah. But what also I hear a lot about is, what is the right age for me to tell my child something? Or how do we maintain a sexual relationship after we have children? You know, is parenthood where our sex lives go to die? Concerns like that. And that's going to come from any parent, you know, no matter what they're practicing, if they're poly, if they're kinky, if they're very traditional, if they're religious, if they're anything, this is often one of the number one concerns. So that's what I want to speak to today. I'm not going into as deeply how do we talk to our kids about sex, but if there's questions about that, we can address that as well. So the good news is that when you are sitting inside of a space where you're already experienced with kink, with fetish, with BDSM, with polyamorous relationships, with polycules, with whatever your format is, um, you already have an incredible skill set and a bit of an advantage in that you have already addressed your own sexuality, your own desires. There is something that you've needed to do in order to have those experiences, to create those relationships, to live that life, because the practice almost absolutely requires it, because it does sit outside of what most of us were taught as children about what is correct, what is the way to live, right? And so if you've already come to grips with your desires to engage in power exchange, to engage in SMM sort of play, to have a particular set of clothing that is interesting and attractive to you that, you know, I mean, maybe it's gym socks, maybe it's corsets, I don't know, but you've probably had a conversation with yourself to kind of be okay with that and say, you know what, I want to find someone else who does this too, and have that as part of my sexual repertoire. So there is already that awareness and okayness, because then you also need to talk with your partners, right? About how are we going to have this? What are our boundaries? What is our safe space? What are our interests, our curiosities? Where do those overlap? You've already exercised this. So when you're talking to your kids, or creating your family dialogues, you have some experience and some flexibility around that. Right. Um, So let us, in this moment, create a safe space for ourselves and our families and our expression and our curiosities, our interests, our concerns, for all of that to just sort of come up, sit with us, and explore how we're going to navigate that terrain. Um, we we can sit in the space of knowing that there is no one correct or true or right way. Every family is unique. Every family is has different needs. Every partnership is its own thing. So what works for one family is going to be different than what works for the next family. And when we approach this from a grounding in our personal values, attitudes, and beliefs, then we can let those guide us in making the decisions that work for us and understanding what's going to create the experience that we want to have, and also hold our personal lives, our family lives, our professional lives, our social lives, all those parts in balance. So that's our goal today. Um, is the speed okay? I notice I'm having a lot of concern, making sure I'm not speaking too fast. Okay, perfect. Cool. Then I'll let that one go because it was sitting in the back of my head. Um, right. So, and the last thing I want to tell you in by ways of introduction is also the my training and my perspective in approaching all of this is also going to be a celebration of the sexual expression, of the uniqueness, the diversity, the however it shows up for you. Um, so long as my line is always around consent, as I imagine for most of you it is as well. Um, Amongst consenting adults, do your thing, do that which makes you happy, and let's celebrate it, because it would be boring if we were all carbon copies of each other. We are not here to be droids. It's not our point. And one of the beautiful things about human sexuality is that it is so wildly different. So someone is turned on by gym socks and another person prefers stilettos, and someone else is like, dude, I just like skin. Like, let me just feel your amazing, luscious, soft, furry self, however it is. So that's good. We want that. All right. So, right, coming from this space, if you already know that we could be approaching this from different things, and I'm not sure exactly who is listening today. Are we already parents and we're looking at exploring kink? Are we kinky folk or poly folk and thinking about having children? Are we somewhere in between all of that? And actually, no matter where we are, it's okay, and there will be a piece for you. Okay. Um, but like I said, if you are already in this space, you have already exercised some of these skills around communication, around boundaries. So the first thing that we need to do, you need to do, is just to sort of look at your life and think about who are the people involved and in what way are they involved and where ultimately is my concern, right? So if we look at it, just beginning from the space of, I am worried that when I have kids, my sex life is over. Let's address that one first, because it's kind of like the first step. We'll go a little linear. From that space, the answer to that is no, it doesn't have to be over. Will it change? Probably. We invite a little person into our home, into our hearts. They tend to require a lot of attention, and it does kind of derail some things for a bit, but it doesn't have to be a total derailment. It's if we can approach it like an adjustment, okay? It shifts our energies. It shifts our priorities. Co-parents are suddenly more interested in making sure that their young one is fed, is bathed, is cared for, is sleeping. And so then they can sleep, because before we can have sexy fun times, we need to be rested and fed and cared for ourselves, right? Just those basic human needs need to be attended to. And it often happens that with the arrival of a child, parents do feel sometimes a little less sexy than they did before. There might be physical changes, there's changes to the schedule, all of those things. And one of the things we do know is that the first buzzkill for any sexual interaction is actually stress. Some people find stress erotic, or no, let me rephrase that. Some people find that sex can help alleviate the stress. But if you're too stressed to even get that sexy feeling, then you have to address the stress and then invite the sexuality back in. So it's about finding that balance. So when you have a new young person, you might notice, those early months of having a baby does tilt things a little bit, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the end. It's an adjustment. And you might find that there are things that are now exciting and new and interesting that weren't before. And there may be other things that used to be fun and now not so much. Maybe for those initial months, intimacy looks more like sharing a cuddle and less about having a scene. And that's okay. It might look like redrawing the boundaries around polyamorous relationships, because right now your focus needs to be on your growing family. And that's also okay. And then you just need to balance, okay, how does everybody in this interaction inside of this relationship adjust? So yeah, that's the first thing. So let's look at that. How do we make those adjustments? And this comes into more of perhaps a poly situation, okay, where maybe you have multiple adults who are in relationships in whatever configuration with each other. In that space, as before there are children involved, the scheduling is often an issue, right? People need to make sure that they are taking time for their partners, for whether there's different structures. There's some have more of a hierarchy. Maybe there's a primary relationship with satellite connections. Maybe there's a trio of people who are on equal footing and they're equally committed to each other and creating a family together as three people, and then they share their children. Maybe there's a primary pair and one has satellites and this one is only connected to this one, whatever it is, in any format that you have, or maybe you have one person with their children and they have like spokes of a wheel, a lot of people, whatever it is, there's going to be concerns about time, about schedules, about attention, who gets what attention when. But when you introduce children to the mix, you also now have the concern um, and the responsibility of thinking, okay, who who are the important people in this child's life? Because a child wants consistency. A child needs to know who their grown-ups are, who are their trusted people. And again, this is a very, very personal decision. And I cannot say that there is a right answer. I know what my answer to this question has been. But I also know that my answer differs from that of a couple of my friends who find themselves in similar situations, the way that they've chosen to handle their interactions, who their child gets to know and when. It's a very personal thing. So I want to make a lot of space here for people and encourage you to look into your own life and think about, okay, this is what's important to me, and how do I introduce these people, and who does my child recognize as parent roles. And I don't think that we have to have only two parents. I think it's totally okay. We see already a lot of blended families where kids have multiple parents, and we know that that works. Um, and I think in that sense, the most important thing is that everybody who is in a caretaker role for a child or children need to be in communication with each other and need to recognize their degree of responsibility and remember what exactly that role means inside of that family unit. Um, Things might get strange if there is a breakup. This is also a concern for poly families, and one that I've also seen in my practice where maybe there was a relationship amongst the adults and they were all bonded to a child or children, and then there was a breakup amongst the adults. What happens now with the one who is out but is still bonded with the children? These guys actually had to figure out custody. In the case that I'm thinking about here. And the parent who was out was not biologically related to the kids, but did have a very deep emotional bond with them. So they did have to figure out a way that the adults could separate peacefully and maintain that stability for the kids, because the kids would have really missed this person in their lives. They were bonded. It was one of their parents. So for suddenly that person to be completely out would have been really upsetting for them. And so they negotiated how to work. In a sense, that was a really positive situation. We recognize not all of them are like that, but we also know that even in a traditional heterosexual nuclear family, the separations aren't always peaceful either. And so we have to take each situation as it comes. There is no one true way, one answer. So those are things that I think are important to think about. And so all of this is going to tap again towards concerns around scheduling, the amount of time we spend with each other. Where do we spend that time? Is there a difference between family time and sexy time? Maybe you're a parent and you choose to keep your poly partners more at a social distance. Maybe they meet the kids, but this is like mom's friend or dad's friend or whatever your child calls you. It's their special friend, and they come around, but you don't have any overt romantic interaction or sexual interaction around the young ones, but they know who they are. Or maybe you have them more involved, or maybe they're more of an auntie sort of situation. You have to do that which makes the most sense for you. Or there's people who are like, okay, at home, we are looking like a traditional nuclear family. And then the adults know that on occasion I go out and on occasion you go out. And you do what you're going to do outside of the house. And we keep a separation here, because that's what works for our family. And that's what is inside of our zone of comfort and our desire to answer questions or explain things to the kids, right? So those boundaries are important. Now, if we think about those sorts of boundaries and we move into more of a BDSM space, again, you have to think about those things, what kind of scenes are we doing? To what degree do we want to have that actively inside of our house? People who do, scenes here and there sometimes might have a different conversation than people who describe their dynamic as more of a 24/7 thing. These are going to bring up different sets of concerns. I'm kind of going quickly across these, but this is not a small topic. If you think about those things, again, you have to think about your reasonable boundaries. What is comfortable and appropriate to have happening in the family space? So if we think about a traditional family, like what probably we were raised on, if sex happens behind closed doors, probably after the kids have gone to sleep or when they're out of the house, we don't necessarily, pull our co-parent over on the couch and hop on them in the middle of cartoon watching with the kids. I mean, I don't think, I don't know, maybe you do that. Maybe that's normal in your house, and that's, do your thing. But every family is going to have different boundaries around, how visible things are. But if you have a 24/7 thing going, you might want to tap into using coded language with your partner. So you two know what you're talking about, little signals, winks, hand squeezes, things that mean a thing to you that aren't necessarily readable. But these are possibly also things you're already doing out and about in the world, because maybe you want to be kinky in public without everybody knowing what you're doing. So there are small little tweaks that you can make inside of your dynamic. Things that, for people who engage in scenes that are more noticeable, maybe you really enjoy S&M play, you're into spanking and flogging, things that naturally make some noise. It might be the case that it's okay to do it when the kids are sleeping because they're deep sleepers and they're not going to hear it. Or you might find that you need to make sure that you have a time and space where you're not going to get one of those casual walk-ins because the child had a nightmare in the middle of the night and came looking for you. And that's going to happen in any family anyway. But if you're feeling like, okay, I definitely don't want my kids to see me and my partner doing this thing, you have locks on the doors, but you also always have the option to find ways to do it somewhere else, or, make plans. If you have the good fortune to have family who can take your child or your children for an evening, so that you and your partners can get your scene on at home, amazing. Or if you have the ability to hire a babysitter and you can go visit your dungeon and do it there, also awesome. If none of these things are available, then maybe you find other quieter ways to do your things. Again, this comes back to every family is unique. Every dynamic has its own needs, and you have to think about, okay, how do we balance all of these things together? And what is our comfortable degree of exposure or awareness for the young people that we are raising? The good news about young ones is that if they're not interested in stuff, and this actually comes up in my sex ed for parents kind of classes, where they're thinking like, they've never asked me about this. And I tried talking to them and they're like, yeah, that's great. And then they went over there. That's also totally normal. Some kids are really curious and some kids are just like, nah. And the really cool thing about young people is they'll listen as far as they're comfortable. And then they kind of tune out and they say, hey, look at my frog. I just built this thing out of Lego. They will switch the topic. They're really good at kind of just engaging, listening to the answer that you give them, accepting it or not. Sometimes it's a little frustrating. especially if you're having a conversation about the importance of homework and they've like tuned you out because they're like, no, I don't need to do this. But young ones will tune, they'll engage in their ways. But this also is where it's on us as parents to have an active think. Like it's really important for us to actively think about what is it that we want in our family environment? What do we want our kids to know? What are the values of our family? What are we teaching our young people? What is normal for us? How do we want them to engage in the world? What are we teaching them? And then to balance our doings with an awareness of how we keep our young ones in a safe space for them, because ultimately that is our responsibility as parents. When we have children, we just sort of sign on for that sort of thing. But yeah, as I keep saying, every family is unique. Every family has their degree of comfort with how they're going to talk about things and how much, even how affectionate they are. Some families do a lot of hugging and cuddling, and other families not so much. It's very unique to them. So it's on us as the parents to decide what's going to work in our household. I'm just going to take a quick look at my notes to make sure I'm not completely off track. But just to check in, so far so good, making sense? You see Kasha smiling. Okay, cool. I'm going to take that as yeah, we're fine. Okay. Also to that end, as far as kids asking questions and us asking them, we need to be aware that they are always watching us. And they're like little computers. This is how they pick up languages. This is how they pick up social mores. This is how they learn what is right and wrong. They are watching us all the time. Okay? Even when it looks like they're not paying attention, even when we think we've told them a thing and they clearly haven't taken it in, they're kind of still always watching. They're learning. So they will. Okay, I'll get that. I have to ask, what does that mean?
I wrote creepy that they are watching us. It's like,
Oh, they are.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean, right? They totally are watching us. They're checking us out. But they're picking up their cues. What is normal from us? So let us be responsible people who are raising civilized young people who are going to go out into the world and treat each other with kindness and respect. Okay, that's me projecting my set of values. And hoping that the world reflects them back. But when we think about that, we want to be responsible role models. We want to think about the young adults, the emerging adults that we are raising actively, because they are taking their cues. And so we want to notice, what are we modeling? How are we treating each other? What are we letting them see? And inside of that, we are remembering things that are okay and normal inside of a kinky power dynamic might not translate to the everyday outside world. So we want to make sure that we're very clear to demonstrate to them healthy communication, respectful, mutual care and respect inside of relationships. We want to think about who we want them to be as adults and model that for them. And so in that sense, sometimes, aside from, a sexual space, just I hope we can generally agree that some of these spaces are just not appropriate for young people. And I know every culture, every nation has like a different age at which it's considered okay, or the ages of consent vary a great deal. I'm sitting in Munich, Germany right now. I know that age of consent begins around 14 for two people who are within one calendar year of age, right? That's what's normal here. I know that's super different from where I grew up in California in the United States, where age of consent is 18. And if you have an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old getting together, that 18-year-old is liable for statutory rape. So, which is a little different. So, and I'm not sure what the laws are in Poland, but just as a word to acknowledge there is a variety out there, which is why I'm not speaking directly to it. And everybody has to look into what is appropriate for themselves, their culture, their family. But we want to make sure that we're modeling healthy communication, care and respect, mutual care and respect. And if a kid walks into a DS scene where someone is yelling, one partner's yelling at the other, it might be distressing. And so maybe that's something that you don't want to do around them, or be prepared for addressing that. And also the awareness that kids talk amongst themselves. So if for your family, it's very normal that there's 5 adults in relationship to each other, your kid's going to talk about that at school. When they draw a picture of their family, they're probably going to draw you all because to them that is normal, that is beautiful. And yeah, this is my mom and dad and papi and whoever, however they call you all. And if they get any pushback from teachers or other classmates, like, oh, who are all these other people? Or I thought your parents were together. Have they separated and remarried or something like that? This actually does happen. So you want to be aware of the outside world and also be ready to prepare your child to talk about that, because you don't want them to have the experience of the other kids going, hey, that's weird. Or, teachers telling them, no, that's not what a family looks like, because they just aren't aware. And I'm not saying you have to go and out yourself, but you also want to equip your kids so that they know how they can communicate with the outside world as they start to encounter it, even as young as kindergarten, because they will. And what's normal for them is normal and beautiful for them, but they might not know that other families don't come with 3 dads and 4 moms. I keep adding people. But and I know that's very gendered, but with multiple parents of however they call them. So you need to be responsible for that. So in creating your family dialogue, you want to plan for this and have a conversation with your co-parent or co-parents, depending on your structure, what is okay, or your play partners, and let them know, like, yeah, sweetie, I really love you, but I'm not ready for you to meet my family because we're just not there yet. Or yes, I want you to come in and meet everybody, but then please be aware that if my kids meet you and you're going to have a role in their lives, there's an expectation that, you're going to continue to show up for them. If you bond with them, please take that on responsibly. Or, I'd love for you to meet them, but I don't think I want to be co-parenting, so I don't want the bonding to happen. So I'm going to introduce you in this space, even though you and I know we're really in love and we're collared and we're committed and everything. I'm going to introduce you here as my friend. And please just be okay with that, because that's a safe boundary for my family and my extended family. My Nana doesn't need to know. I'm talking a lot about kids, but we also think about our older generations. What do our parents and our grandparents think? How do we introduce our various people to them? And what conversations are we wanting to have? To what degree are we wanting to explain or reveal our sex lives to them? So these are all things to think about. I'm sorry, I'm coming with all the questions and none of the answers today. Just like you have to do this thinking. Checking again. But I'm looking at our time. Okay. So ultimately, like I said, I'm sorry, I don't have necessarily the answers, but really the things that you need to take into consideration when you do all of these things, what do we need to watch for? What do we need to be responsible for? And I want to couple that with encouragement to continue to live your best, sexiest life. Do it. There's no reason not to have it all. And it is very, very possible. And a lot of people do it very successfully, joyfully, with all of the goodness. And they do have happy, well-adjusted, civilized, well-mannered, intelligent, amazing children. And those kids grow up just fine. So yeah, you can do it. Oh, that was the last thing. What do you do when your kids find your toys? I don't know, just say, oh yeah, that's where that thing is. If it's a non-event for you, it's probably a non-event for them. And if they ask questions, then just be ready to answer it. I mean, and they'll take in as much of that as they want to or not, even teenagers. Will be like, yeah, I don't want to know. Or, ooh, that's really interesting. Tell me more. You don't know. It depends on your kid. I think I'm going to pause there and see if there's questions. It feels like a good spot.
Tak, zapraszamy bardzo do zadawania pytań Celinie. Mogą być po polsku i po angielsku, tak jak Kasia pisze na czacie. Celina, bardzo dziękujemy. Czy są jakieś pytania? W takim razie ja troszkę jestem ciekawa, jak jeszcze czekamy na inne pytania, może się jeszcze pojawią. Celino, właśnie mówiłaś dużo o właśnie dbaniu o kontakty z dzieckiem, właśnie o rozmawianiu z nimi, też na uważności na to, na co one są gotowe, żeby im powiedzieć, ale też uważności na to, na co my i wszystkie osoby zaangażowane też mają gotowość, żeby powiedzieć. Ale tak zastanawiam się, ponieważ to też padło dzisiaj już też na innym wykładzie, ta taka duża obawa związana z przyłapaniem właśnie na przykład rodziców na seksie przez dzieci. I że jest to jakoś takie dosyć powszechne. To tak zastanawiam się, co właśnie, jak można sobie poradzić i jak można też zaopiekować dzieci w sytuacji, kiedy ten seks, na który zostaliśmy przyłapani, jest właśnie kinkowy, BDSM-owy, oprócz tego, że w ogóle jest seksem. Jak można te dzieci zaopiekować, jak można siebie zaopiekować, kiedy właśnie nie było tej podstawy, że nigdy wcześniej o tym nie rozmawialiśmy.
Gorgeous. I love this question. Yeah, and we probably, if we took a poll, probably at least 80% of us would put our hand up and say, yeah, I walked in on mom and dad once and like got out of there as fast as I could, or it was super traumatic, or like, oh yeah, they were always at it, whatever. However, each of us related to it. This is a very, very normal kind of experience, I think, for people. And not limited to the BDSM kinky folk or the poly folk. You know, child walks in and maybe sees parent in bed with someone they're like, who is that sort of moment? So yeah, all of that can happen. And yes, it can be awkward. We just need to take a deep breath and ground ourselves and think about, okay, one, what did my child see? Two, how might they be feeling? But I think the most important thing to do is to, you know, kind of sort ourselves out. Notice, is my kid distressed? Do I need to go talk to them now? It's reasonable for us to say to our partner, like, I'm really sorry, but this needs to stop now because my priority is my child. Or if you're like, oh yeah, they're fine, carry on. Again, this is going to depend on your family, but since the question was, we've never had a conversation before, I'm going to go with that end and suggest that probably it's best stop the activity, throw a robe on, go check on your young one and find out, get curious about what they need. Like, oh, hey, you came in. Are you okay? You know, I think you might have seen some stuff. Do you have any questions or what is going on? You know, what's going on for you? Get curious about what their experience is, because sometimes what we are concerned about is actually quite different from a child's perception and concern. And we might think, oh, they might be worried about what all those vloggers were, but they're actually thinking like, why are you doing this at this hour? Isn't everybody supposed to be asleep? Why aren't you asleep too? Like, you're not following the rules. We don't know, but it could be something like that. Or it could be like, what exactly are you doing? And I heard a scary noise. Are you okay? You know, if they hear a scream, they might worry that someone is getting hurt. And that's really upsetting for a little one. You know, little kids tend to be really concerned about other people's ouch because they want other people to be concerned when they have ouch. And this is a thing. So I would say step one, you know, just say like, right, sorry, we got to break the scene. Step two, go and check on your child. Step three, get really curious about what their concern is, what's happening for them, make sure they are fine. Do they just need to be tucked back into bed? Or if it's daytime, do they need whatever they need? But reassure them that everything is fine. Answer whatever question that they have. But before volunteering information, I would find out what do they need to know, because it might be very different than what you think it is. Does that help? Does that answer?
Bardzo dziękujemy. Ja zwłaszcza dziękuję, bo to było
Ja.
moje pytanie. A teraz mamy jeszcze inne pytanie na czacie i to pytanie w języku angielskim. Czyli jak przygotować dziecko na takie oskarżenia, że właśnie nie tak wygląda rodzina, nie tak powinna wyglądać rodzina. Jak przygotować dziecko na to, że może takie
This is
oskarżenia
a
usłyszy.
beautiful question. Beautiful. Have a conversation with your child about families come in all shapes and sizes. Families are different. And you can even, okay, I'm going to say spin it. I'm going to go with it. I'm going to say spin it like, you know what? You are in a really amazing space in that you can see that different families have different configurations. And some families look like this and other families look like that. And okay, maybe your classmate thinks this, but that might just be their experience. They only know this way and they haven't had the opportunity to learn about different families. You know, and this is actually a very similar thing to what we might say to kids who are third culture. Third culture children who don't necessarily fit in the one place or the other place, but you know, because their parents are mixed, they're international. We have this conversation a lot there, like, oh, why do you speak this language? Nobody does that. It's like, well, actually, it's really cool. And it's kind of a superpower to be trilingual. We can do this, we can apply the same logic here. Like every family is different. And this is what ours looks like, and this is normal for us. And maybe that's just new for your classmate, but you can tell them, no, this is great and I love it. And these are my people and I love them and they love me. And it's good. I would always reassure our children that they are fine, they are normal, they are safe, they are loved. That's what they want. And we can learn about difference. We can get curious, like, okay, well, what is their family like? You know, and let's approach that also with a sense of curiosity because we are all different. Also, just in terms of, because I know a parent loves a resource, there's so many books written now about different kinds of families. And I'm not savvy to what is available in Poland, but I'm hoping that a lot of things I know are written in English have been translated, but there are resources out there. And to that end, I also want to say, the most important thing is you find the resource that resonates with you and use that. You know, we all get our favorites. My personal favorite is For Goodness Sex. It's Al Vernaccio. It's about parenting from a family values kind of perspective, but values as defined by that family. Recognizing that we don't all come from exactly the identical space. So, yeah, I would go from there and talk about, okay, well, in our family, this is normal. Other families have different perspectives, and that's okay too.
Bardzo dziękujemy, Celino, dziękujemy za pytanie i naprawdę to zaszczyt, że tutaj dołączyłaś do nas z Twojej wspaniałej wirtualnej biblioteki. Tak mi się wydaje, że to biblioteka wirtualna, w której się znajdujesz. Dziękujemy bardzo.
Yes, this is where I used to like to study in university. So it's my happy space. But thank you so much for having me today. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to be together with you. Thank you for your questions. If you want to contact me directly, Kasia has my information. I am completely okay with you sharing my email and website. And yeah, just let me know this is where you found me, and I'd love to talk to you if you have more questions about it. Hi, Holly. Oh, cool. All right. And kisses to Agatha. I love that we're here
Dziękujemy
together
bardzo,
for a moment.
Celina.
We
Do
work together a
zobaczenia.
lot. Super team. I love it. But with that, I think I'm going to, are we